Greenland looks like the edge of the world, mostly ice, very few people, far from everything that matters. But that impression is outdated, because in the Arctic, geography isn't just geography, it's strategy. And as the ice changes, Greenland's value is changing with it. Greenland, Kalaallit Nunaat in the local language, is the world's largest island. It's a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. Most of the population lives along the coast. The interior is dominated by the Greenland ice sheet, one of only 2 ice sheets left on Earth. So the question isn't, why would anyone want Greenland? The question is, why does Greenland keep showing up in global security and resource conversations right now? Start with the simplest shift. The map is lying to you. On a flat projection, Russia and the United States look far apart. On a globe, the shortest route between major northern regions curve toward the Arctic. That's why long-haul flights often pass near Greenland. And it's why military planners have always treated the Arctic as a corridor, not a frontier. In high-speed scenarios, time and distance collapse. The Arctic stops being remote. It becomes a passage. And Greenland sits beside key approaches into the North Atlantic and the broader Arctic region. Even if you never mine a single ton of anything, that position still matters. It shapes where you can see, where you can move, and how quickly you can respond. If you want a simple way to think about it, Greenland is less a destination than a hinge. A hinge between the Arctic and the Atlantic, between North America and Europe, between far north and the routes that connect alliance space. That matters in 2 ways. First, because early warning is about geometry. The earlier you detect something, the more options you have, politically and militarily. And in a world of faster systems, warning time becomes more valuable, not less. Second, because corridors don't need to be used every day to be strategically relevant. A corridor matters when it becomes the contingency plan, when it's the option you keep open because one day you might need it. This is also why Greenland's strategic importance is not new. During the Cold War, the United States and its allies built detection systems across the far north because warning time matters. One site in particular, today known as Pituffik Space Base, has long been connected to early warning and space tracking missions. But the American footprint in Greenland has changed over the decades. Many facilities from earlier eras were reduced or closed, reflecting shifting technology, budgets, and strategic priorities. So Greenland never stopped mattering, it simply became quieter. And that quiet period is important, because it explains why so many people think Greenland suddenly appeared on the strategic map. It didn't. The map stayed the same, the context changed. For a while, the Arctic felt stable. Routes were limited, infrastructure was sparse. The cost of operating at that latitude acted like a natural barrier. And when global attention shifted elsewhere, Greenland looked like a place you could ignore without consequence. That assumption is now breaking. The first big shift is physical: ice, access, and routes. Warming in the Arctic is altering access. As sea ice patterns change, seasonal navigation becomes less hypothetical. That doesn't mean the Arctic turns into an easy highway. Conditions remain dangerous, unpredictable, and expensive. But it does mean that coastlines, harbors, and passages that were once reliably locked by ice are being reconsidered for transport, logistics, and security planning. When movement changes, leverage changes. Even if the change is only for part of the year, here's the part people miss. The story isn't new shipping lanes will replace Suez. The story is optionality. Even a short seasonal corridor forces planners to ask new questions. Where do you refuel? Where do you repair? Where do you stage search and rescue? Who provides the maps, the comms, the insurance, the ports, the rules? Because the Arctic is not just geography, it's a system. Routes create demand for services, and services create infrastructure, and infrastructure creates influence. And influence in the Arctic is often built quietly, not with speeches, but with standards, contracts, port calls, research agreements, and dependencies that feel technical until they become political. That is why Greenland's location next to North Atlantic approaches matters more as access shifts. You don't need to believe in an Arctic highway to understand the leverage of being near the choke points and the staging areas. Now, the second big shift is economic resources. Greenland has attracted attention for mineral potential, including materials described as critical in modern supply chains. These resources matter not only for consumer technology, but also for energy systems and defense industries, because advanced equipment often depends on specialized components and materials. However, extracting minerals in Greenland is not simple. It's shaped by environmental constraints, infrastructure limits, global prices, and local politics. So the story isn't a guaranteed treasure chest. The story is that Greenland is increasingly viewed as a possible future contributor in a world that is anxious about supply security. And supply anxiety changes behavior. Governments and firms start paying for redundancy. They start valuing resilience over pure cost. They start treating upstream access as a strategic question, not just a market question. But Greenland also imposes friction that markets can't wish away. Mining and logistics in remote Arctic conditions are expensive. Projects require long timelines. Regulations matter. Local consent matters, and the environment is not a backdrop, it's the constraint. So the realistic framing is not rush, it's position. Greenland becomes relevant because it sits at the intersection of strategic minerals and strategic geography, while still having real politics that can say no. That political reality is the third shift, and it's the one most headlines flatten. Greenland is not an empty prize waiting to be claimed. It has its own government, its own debates, and a long conversation about autonomy and the future relationship with Denmark. Denmark remains responsible for areas like defense and foreign affairs in key ways, while Greenland manages many domestic matters. That split matters because outside interest, whether from allies or competitors, lands in a sensitive space, local economic hopes, environmental concerns, and questions of sovereignty. Outside powers often talk as if Greenland is a square on a chessboard, but for Greenlanders, it's home, its identity, its livelihoods tied to the coast, and it's a political project, how to build a future without losing control of it. That's why talk of buying Greenland triggers backlash. Even when framed as a deal, it sounds like a return to an older world where powerful states treat territory as transferable property. And politically, it risks something modern alliances depend on: trust. Because Denmark is a NATO ally, any suggestion of coercion, economic or rhetorical, creates avoidable friction. It hands rivals a narrative that the West is divided, and it forces smaller partners to ask uncomfortable questions about reliability and respect. And here's the strategic irony: even if a major power wanted more Greenland, the most effective path would be the least theatrical one: quiet investment, respectful partnership, long-term agreements, and credibility with local institutions. Which brings us to the quieter driver that matters as much as any headline: influence. As the Arctic becomes more navigable and more economically relevant, major powers look for partnerships, access agreements, and long-term positioning, from research to infrastructure to investment. For Greenland, that can mean options. For the United States and Europe, it can mean risk, because influence isn't only built with soldiers. It can be built with contracts, logistics, standards, and dependencies. A port expansion can matter. An airport upgrade can matter. A research partnership can matter. Not because any one project controls Greenland, but because networks accumulate. And once networks accumulate, they become hard to unwind. So Greenland becomes a test case for a larger question: how do powerful countries pursue interests in strategic places without breaking the alliances and norms they claim to defend? Because if Greenland becomes only a bargaining chip, it will create backlash. If it becomes only a military outpost, it will trigger suspicion. And if it becomes only a resource play, it will collide with environmental limits and local politics. So Greenland is not just ice, it's early warning geography, changing access in a warming Arctic, and long-term competition over materials and influence, filtered through the real politics of sovereignty and alliance management. The hardest question isn't whether Greenland matters, it's how powerful countries pursue their interests there, without destabilizing the relationships they claim to protect.